I'm Trevor Tchir, Associate Professor of Political Science and Chair of the Department of Law and Politics at Algoma University. I think that more than most elections, this one seems to really be focused on the leadership styles and the leadership resumes of just a couple of the main parties. Really there's a big Donald Trump factor in this election. Ever since the President of the United States announced significant tariffs, specifically for Sault Ste. Marie, these are tariffs on steel and aluminum, as well as suggesting that Canada would be better off as the 51st state. The election has really focused on what party and what party leader, then Prime Minister, would be best disposed to make the Canadian economy resilient in the face of these tariffs, who would best negotiate with Trump and his team on the future trade negotiations in a few months, and who can make Canada resilient in a period of economic instability at first, and even in facing a president who sometimes thrives on keeping other world leaders guessing. This election feels different to me because in most elections, the different federal party leaders need to do two things. They need to convince the electorate about what the election is about, and then they need to convince the electorate that their party is the best at responding to that issue. So they're trying to find wedge issues where they can create a difference. They can win on that issue in relation to other parties. In this election, with the tariffs and this discourse of Canada being better off as a 51st state, it's pretty clear what the main issue in the election is about. It's the economy. It's the tariffs, it's affordability. There are other important issues, certainly like housing and health. But this one's about the economy and which party and party leader can make Canada most resilient in this crisis, really. It's also an interesting one because we're seeing a lot of the institutions in our neighbor to the south, democratic institutions, really under threat in that style of governance. And so this election, I think people are paying a little bit more attention to our own democratic practices and our own democratic institutions. We like to see people, for instance, show up to debates in Canada. It's not a time when we can even take these democratic practices and institutions for granted anymore. And so people are noticing when candidates don't show up for debates. The Conservative candidate locally hasn't been to debates in Sault Ste. Marie, Hugh Stevenson, and that's concerning for several other candidates, but also even Conservative supporters who are saying, hey, what's going on here? There hasn't yet been costed platforms published by the major parties. What happened to costed platforms? I'm sure they'll come out, but we're already, during this interview, we've had the French language debate, we're going to have the English language debate tonight, and there haven't been costed platforms yet. So I think that there's hunger for more transparency than we're getting. Because the electoral issue is about leadership and leading the economy, it's really become, I think, a leadership race that's more focused on the national level and the future of Canada rather than perhaps one's favorite local candidate. There are several challenges facing our community here in Sault Ste. Marie, Algoma. Housing is a big one. High costs of houses, high costs of rent, just not having enough housing available. So homelessness is a big issue. Precarious housing for students, including international students, is a big one. The cost of living is a real important issue. Groceries cost a mint these days. So there's precarity and affordability challenges. access to health care, which is a shared provincial federal jurisdiction, access to emergency rooms, to doctors, nurses, and nurse practitioners, waiting lines, access to dental care. These are big issues. The economy, job precarity, especially in the face of Trump's current and threatened tariffs, is a huge issue for Sault Ste. Marie as a steel town. And mental health, drug addiction, and crime, these are all seem to be perennial issues in Sault Ste. Marie. And the health of the environment and climate change is an issue in Sault Ste. Marie like the rest of the country. And so the leaders of these parties who want to be prime minister or get enough seats in the House of Commons to really make a difference are facing the challenge of balancing between economic resiliency and economic growth, creating the kind of tax base through economic growth that will enable an investment in health, while at the same time coming up with a strategy for fighting climate change and trying to make save the planet from environmental crisis. And that's a pretty tall task. The last provincial election in Sault Ste. Marie was determined by the slimmest of margins, roughly 100 votes. And the same thing can happen in particular ridings across Canada. So really, voting matters, every vote matters, and although we don't get to vote for our Prime Minister directly, our votes and how many seats each of these parties collects in the House of Commons does determine our next Prime Minister and leader of the country. And if it's a case of a minority government, it matters how many seats the other parties have to form kind of coalitions when it comes time to vote. So every vote matters. I'd encourage all people who are eligible to vote to get out there and do it, and to get to know the party's platforms, to get to know the local candidates and the federal candidates, and also to look at the polls and to vote with open eyes about what's really at stake. I don't think voting according to principle is a bad thing, but I don't think voting according to strategic voting with eyes wide open is a bad thing either. So get out there and vote on Election Day.